My name is Marcus Thorne, and 46 days ago, I was sworn in as the 34th governor of the great state of Wyoming. The inauguration was a picture-perfect American moment. The crisp January air, the snow-dusted peaks of the Laramie Mountains in the distance, my hand on a Bible that had been in my family for 100 years. I spoke of transparency, of a new chapter for our state, of bridging divides. I believed every word I said. I was naive. I thought the biggest challenges I would face were budget deficits and land use debates. I had no idea about the real secret I was inheriting, the one that doesn't get passed down in briefing books, but in a hushed, private meeting that changes you forever. That meeting happened a week after the inauguration. My predecessor, Governor Thompson, a man I had known my whole life, invited me to his private ranch. I expected a final, friendly handover of advice. What I got was the truth. We sat by a crackling fire, a bottle of fine Wyoming whiskey between us. "Marcus," he began, his voice low and heavy, "there are certain continuation of government protocols that aren't written down, a legacy passed from one governor to the next, outside of any official record." He told me a story that began in the 1970s, a story about a first contact event that never made the news. It didn't happen in Roswell or Washington, D.C. It happened here, in the vast, empty wilderness of our state. A small, exploratory vessel, damaged and seeking refuge, made a quiet, controlled landing in an isolated, uncharted valley. They weren't invaders. They were cartographers, scientists, from a civilization so old it made ours look like a brief, flickering candle. They offered a deal, a pact. They needed a sanctuary, a place to live and observe, completely isolated from the prying eyes of the world. In exchange, they would offer gifts, not weapons, but technology, clean, near-limitless geothermal energy drawn from the Yellowstone supervolcano, advanced agricultural techniques that made our crops drought-resistant, subtle things, quiet miracles that allowed Wyoming to prosper in ways no analyst could ever quite explain. "We are not just a state, Marcus," Thompson said, his eyes locking onto mine, his expression deadly serious. "We are a preserve. We are the wardens of a secret that, if revealed, could either elevate humanity to the stars or plunge it into a war it could never win." He told me that my most important duty as governor had nothing to do with the people who elected me. My most important duty was to protect the valley, to uphold the pact. I left his ranch that night a different man. The weight of my office was no longer about budgets and laws. It was about guarding a secret that was both a terrifying burden and a breathtaking miracle. And I was utterly, completely alone with it. The days that followed were a surreal blur. I attended meetings, signed bills, and smiled for cameras, all while carrying a secret that felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. Every decision I made was now viewed through a new, secret lens. How does this affect the pact? How does this protect the valley? The prosperous, stable state I had inherited was not the result of good governance alone. It was a carefully maintained illusion, subsidized by a silent, alien partnership. To be a warden, I had to first understand what I was guarding. Thompson had given me a single, untraceable satellite phone. "They'll call you when they're ready," was all he said. The call came 2 weeks later. The voice on the other end was human, a calm, professional woman who introduced herself only as the liaison. She gave me coordinates to a remote, unmarked airstrip in the Bihorn Mountains. I flew there alone in a small, state-owned propeller plane. A black, unmarked helicopter was waiting for me. The two pilots wore plain, black flight suits with no insignia. They didn't speak a word, just nodded as I boarded. We flew for an hour, deeper into the Wyoming wilderness than I had ever been, over vast stretches of forest and rock where there were no roads, no signs of human life. We landed in a small clearing. The liaison was waiting for me. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that was both reassuring and unnerving. She wasn't one of them, but she had clearly spent a lifetime working alongside them. "Welcome, Governor," she said, her voice the same as on the phone. "There are a few things you need to see to fully understand the responsibilities you've inherited." She led me to what looked like a solid rock face. As we approached, a section of the rock shimmered and dissolved, revealing a dark tunnel. It was holographic camouflage, a piece of their technology. Inside, a silent electric cart waited. We traveled for miles through a subterranean passage, the walls a smooth, obsidian-like material that seemed to drink the light. The tunnel opened into a massive underground facility. This was the human side of the operation, the Warden's Post. It was a sprawling complex of labs, monitoring stations, and living quarters, all powered by a clean, silent energy source I didn't recognize. This was the true source of the state's prosperity. Here, a small, dedicated team of human scientists and engineers, their existence completely off the books, worked to adapt and integrate the technologies the colonists provided. "The Pact is simple," the liaison explained, as we walked through a pristine lab where scientists were studying plants that grew under a strange purple light. "We provide them with absolute isolation and security. We monitor the outside world for any potential threats to their secrecy. In exchange, they provide us with solutions, not weapons, solutions to problems: energy, agriculture, medicine. We're the bridge, Governor. We take their theoretical science and make it work for our world, quietly introducing it through grants to the university or as innovations from private, state-funded startups." I saw it then. The reason our state had the best crop yields, the lowest energy costs, the cleanest air. It wasn't a political achievement. It was a technological one, a gift from a silent, hidden partner. I was the CEO of a company whose most valuable asset had to remain a permanent off-balance sheet secret. After touring the Warden's Post, the liaison led me to the final door. It was a simple circular airlock at the end of a long, sterile corridor. There were no visible locks, no keypads, just a smooth, seamless surface. "This is as far as our technology goes," she said softly. "Beyond this point is their world. They call it the Preserve." She placed her palm on a small, almost invisible panel on the wall. A low chime echoed through the corridor, and the massive door irised open with a silent, fluid motion. The air that flowed out was different, warmer, carrying the scent of damp earth, strange blossoms, and something else. Something faintly electric, like the air after a thunderstorm. "They're expecting you, Governor. They believe a personal meeting is a vital part of the transition of trust." Stepping through the doorway was like stepping into another world. The Preserve wasn't a collection of sterile buildings. It was a living, breathing ecosystem housed within a colossal subterranean cavern. A soft, ambient light emanated from the ceiling hundreds of feet above, mimicking a gentle, overcast sky. Strange bioluminescent flora cast a soft purple and blue glow across a landscape of rolling hills, crystal-clear streams, and architecture that seemed grown rather than built. The structures were elegant, curving spires of a pearlescent material, seamlessly integrated into the natural environment. And then I saw them, the colonists. They were not the reptilian beings I had imagined from hushed conspiracy theories. They were tall and slender, with pale, almost translucent skin that held a faint, shifting iridescence. Their limbs were long and graceful, and their large, dark eyes, devoid of pupils, held a profound, unnerving intelligence. They moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, their simple, flowing robes the color of cream. They were beautiful and ancient. You could feel the weight of millennia in their calm, silent observation. One of them approached me. He was older, his skin holding a deeper, more complex pattern of iridescence. The liaison had told me his name, or the closest human approximation of it, Olin. He didn't speak with his mouth. His voice was a calm, resonant baritone that formed directly in my mind, a clear and precise telepathic communication. Welcome, Governor Thorne. It is a moment of great significance when a new warden joins the Accord. I spent hours with Olin. He walked me through their home, explaining their history, their philosophy, and their purpose here. He showed me their archives, vast libraries of crystalline data storage containing the history of 1,000 extinct civilizations. He explained that their own species was nearing its end, their biology reaching a natural evolutionary conclusion. Their presence on Earth was not just about survival, it was about preservation. They were the last librarians of a dying galaxy, and humanity was the vessel they had chosen to inherit their knowledge. We do not interfere directly, Olin's thoughts explained, as we stood on a balcony overlooking a city of silent, graceful beings. We only offer a gentle current in the river of your development, hoping to steer you away from the same self-destructive rapids that claimed so many others. The weight of my secret deepened. This wasn't a simple pact for technology. It was a custodial arrangement for the legacy of an entire galaxy. As I prepared to leave, Olin left me with a final chilling thought. The greatest threat to this accord, Governor, has never been from your world's public. It has always been from the few within your own government who see knowledge not as a gift, but as a weapon to be controlled. For a year, I lived a dual life. To the public, I was Governor Thorne, a steady, if unexciting leader. I cut ribbons at new, miraculously efficient water treatment plants, and I announced state-funded grants for agricultural startups that produced impossible yields. In private, I was the warden, receiving quiet briefings from the liaison, making decisions that balanced the delicate needs of the Pact with the mundane reality of state politics. The secret was a constant low-grade hum in the back of my mind, a quiet weight that isolated me from everyone I knew. The threat Olin had warned me about arrived not in a black helicopter, but in a dusty Subaru. Her name was Sarah Jennings, an investigative journalist from a national news outlet in New York. She wasn't a UFO chaser or a conspiracy theorist. She was worse. She was a Pulitzer-winning data journalist, a bloodhound who could smell a statistical anomaly from 1,000 miles away. And Wyoming, she had decided, was full of them. She came to my office for a standard, prearranged interview. She was sharp, disarmingly polite, and her questions were surgical. She didn't ask about aliens. She asked about the state's energy grid, how we had achieved a 70% surplus while the rest of the country struggled with an aging infrastructure. She asked about the sudden, inexplicable drop in childhood asthma rates in counties bordering the Yellowstone caldera. She asked about a state-funded seed company whose patents for drought-resistant wheat seemed to defy known botanical science. She had spreadsheets, charts, and graphs. She had laid out the quiet prosperity of my state and correctly identified it as a statistical impossibility. "Governor," she said, her eyes calm but relentlessly probing, "Wyoming's success doesn't just look good, it looks unnatural. It's like your entire state is benefiting from a quiet, technological miracle, and I want to know where it's coming from." I gave her the practiced, plausible answers. I spoke of innovation, of smart investments, of the rugged, self-reliant spirit of the Wyoming people. But I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe a word of it. She wasn't looking for a political story. She was looking for a scientific one. The liaison was deeply concerned. She has no idea what she's looking for, but she's digging in the right place. Her line of inquiry, if pursued, will inevitably lead to the warden's post and the energy signatures from the valley. The Pact had protocols for this: subtle misdirection, feeding her a plausible but less spectacular story, arranging for a sudden, career-making scoop on the other side of the country to draw her away. But Sarah Jennings was different. She was tenacious. She rented a small house in Cheyenne and made it clear she wasn't leaving until she had her answer. For the first time, I felt the pact begin to tremble. It was a delicate house of cards built on decades of secrecy, and a single, determined journalist with a laptop and a nose for the truth was threatening to blow it all down. The first attempts to divert Sarah were subtle. A major political scandal, conveniently leaked, erupted in the state capitol. A juicy story of corruption involving a state senator that should have consumed any journalist's attention for weeks. Sarah reported on it, competently and thoroughly, but never once took her eyes off the larger, statistical mystery she had uncovered. She treated the scandal like a temporary distraction, a piece of local color, not the main event. Then, the liaison escalated. A source within a federal agency offered Sarah a lead on a much bigger story, a massive corporate environmental crime with national implications, a story that would make her career. They even booked her a flight to Washington, D.C. She thanked the source, filed the information away, and canceled the flight. Her focus on Wyoming was absolute, almost obsessive. She isn't just looking for a story anymore, Governor. The liaison's voice was grim over the secure line. She's convinced she's found a conspiracy. The more we try to push her away, the more it confirms her suspicions. The pressure began to mount from the other side as well. Olin, the colonist leader, made a rare request for a meeting. I returned to the preserve, the serene, beautiful valley now feeling less like a sanctuary and more like the heart of a gathering storm. Olin's thoughts were calm, but I could sense a deep undercurrent of concern. The seeker, the journalist, her methods are persistent. She is analyzing public land records, flight manifests from remote airstrips, and satellite imagery. Her pattern of inquiry is drawing a circle, and the center of that circle is this valley. He explained that the colonists' greatest fear was a premature, uncontrolled discovery. Their history was filled with encounters with younger species who had reacted to their presence with fear and violence. The Chimera Accord was designed to prevent that, to build a bridge of trust over generations, not to have it shattered by a single news report. If she reveals even a fraction of what she suspects, your world's governments will be forced to act. They will lock this place down. They will sever the accord, and the balance we have maintained for 50 years will be broken. The consequences for both our species would be unpredictable. I was trapped. Sarah Jennings, in her quest for the truth, was threatening to unleash a reality that humanity was not ready for. The wardens, in their efforts to protect the secret, were only making her dig deeper. And the colonists, the silent partners in this grand, secret enterprise, were now looking to me, the newest warden, to solve a problem that had no easy solution. That night, back in the governor's mansion, I received an anonymous, encrypted email. It contained a single file, a detailed dossier on Sarah Jennings. It included her psychological profile, her family history, her financial records, and a list of her hidden vulnerabilities. At the bottom was a simple, chilling message. A problem requires a solution. We can provide one. The email wasn't from the liaison. It was from the faction of wardens who believed in protecting the Pact by any means necessary. They were offering me a way to neutralize Sarah Jennings, not by drawing her away with a story, but by destroying her life. I stared at the dossier on the tablet, my stomach churning. This was the dark underbelly of the Pact, the moral compromise that Thompson never mentioned. The wardens weren't just scientists and liaisons, they were protectors. And some of them were willing to go to any length to ensure the secret remained safe. They were offering me a way out, a clean, quiet solution that would make Sarah Jennings and her uncomfortable questions simply disappear. They could fabricate a scandal, ruin her reputation, plant evidence of plagiarism, 1,000 small cuts that would bleed her credibility dry until no one would ever take her seriously again. My first instinct was revulsion. This wasn't what I signed up for. I was a governor, a public servant, not a shadowy figure in a conspiracy. But then I thought of the alternative. I thought of Olin's warning, of the fragile peace maintained by this 50-year-old secret. If Sarah published her story, even a fraction of it, the consequences would be catastrophic. Global panic, military intervention, the end of the Accord, and the potential for a conflict that humanity could not survive. Was the career and reputation of one woman worth risking all of that? The question haunted me for days. I was a warden, and my primary duty was to protect the preserve. But was I also a man? Did I have a duty to protect an innocent person from the silent, powerful machine I now commanded? I decided to meet Sarah Jennings again, but this time not as the governor. I arranged an anonymous meeting at a remote diner off a dusty highway. I told her I was a disillusioned state employee with information about the energy surplus. She was wary, but she came. We sat in a worn-out booth, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee. I didn't give her the truth, not the real truth, but I tried to give her a truth. I fed her a carefully constructed, plausible narrative, a story about a classified, experimental geothermal drilling project developed by the military, a technology so advanced and potentially dangerous that its existence was a matter of national security. I gave her documents, heavily redacted but official-looking, that I had fabricated with the help of the liaison. It was a huge story, a conspiracy that would still make her career, but it was a lie designed to steer her away from the larger, more dangerous truth. She listened intently, her journalistic instincts on high alert. She took the files, her eyes scanning the fabricated data. "This is big," she admitted, her voice cautious. "But it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the agricultural patents or the medical anomalies. It's all connected," I lied, my heart pounding. "The energy tech has biological side effects. It's why it's so heavily classified." She looked at me for a long time, her gaze sharp and analytical. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "I'll look into it," she said finally, her voice giving nothing away. As I watched her drive away, I felt a sliver of hope. Maybe the new lie was big enough, juicy enough to satisfy her. But I also felt a profound sense of failure. I had made my choice. I had chosen to protect the Pact. I lied, manipulated, and became the very thing I never wanted to be, a part of the conspiracy. And I had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't be enough. Sarah Jennings was too smart. She had tasted a real mystery, and a fabricated conspiracy, no matter how convincing, might not be enough to make her let go. My carefully constructed lie bought me time, but not much. Sarah Jennings, true to her nature, began digging into the classified geothermal project. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests, contacted former military personnel, and analyzed geological survey data. The deeper she went, the more inconsistencies she found. The timeline didn't quite add up. The scale of the supposed project seemed too vast and too secret, even for the most shadowy corners of the Pentagon, and there were no credible leaks to corroborate the core details. She circled back to Wyoming, her suspicion now laser-focused. She started interviewing locals in the areas surrounding the Bighorn Mountains, asking about unusual activity, strange lights, anything out of the ordinary that might tie into a massive, secret drilling operation. The tight-knit communities of Wyoming are generally private, but Sarah had a way of earning trust, of making people feel comfortable enough to share their odd experiences, the things they had seen but couldn't quite explain away. The liaison was frantic. "She's getting too close to the preserve's perimeter. Her questions about unusual electromagnetic readings and migratory bird patterns are alarming. These are telltale signs of the energy field surrounding the valley." Olin contacted me again, his mental voice carrying a note of urgency I hadn't heard before. "The human seeker is persistent. Her inquiries are beginning to attract unwanted attention from elements outside of our agreement. There are others who watch this world, Governor. If her investigation triggers their interest, the consequences could be far more complex and dangerous than a simple public revelation." His words sent a chill down my spine. The Chimera Accord wasn't the only secret out there. The idea that our quiet pact might inadvertently expose both our species to a larger, unknown galactic stage was terrifying. The pressure from the more radical wardens intensified. The encrypted emails became more frequent, the suggestions less subtle. They offered solutions with increasing boldness, hinting at ways to permanently silence Sarah Jennings. I ignored them, clinging to the hope that my fabricated lie would eventually lead her away. But the foundation of the secret was cracking. The interconnected anomalies of Wyoming's prosperity were too numerous, too statistically improbable to be explained away by a single, albeit large, clandestine military project. Sarah was pulling at loose threads, and with each tug, the entire tapestry of the lie was starting to unravel. Then came the anonymous package delivered to Sarah's motel room. It contained a single photograph, a grainy, enhanced satellite image of the remote valley deep within the Bighorn Mountains, the same valley that housed the preserve. The holographic camouflage was momentarily flickering, revealing the unnatural geometric patterns of the alien architecture within. There was no note, no explanation, just the undeniable image of something that shouldn't exist. Sarah Jennings now knew, or at least she had seen undeniable proof of something extraordinary hidden in Wyoming. My lie had failed. The radical warden's solutions were becoming more appealing to those desperate to protect the Pact, and Olin's warnings of a larger galactic stage hung heavy in the air. The carefully guarded secret was about to shatter, and I, the warden, was standing in the middle of the wreckage. The photograph was the turning point. Sarah Jennings now had visual confirmation of something extraordinary hidden within Wyoming's vast wilderness. She didn't know what it was, but she knew my explanations were insufficient, deliberate misdirection. Her reporting intensified. She contacted geologists, architects, and even fringe science experts, sharing the satellite image and asking for any possible explanations. The responses ranged from bewildered to outlandish, but the image itself was undeniable. The story was on the verge of breaking. The liaison was in constant contact, her voice strained with panic. "Governor, she's preparing to go public. We have credible intelligence that she's contacted a major news network with the photograph and her accumulated data. They're vetting the information now, but it's only a matter of time." The radical faction of wardens made their move. I received a direct, untraceable communication outlining their plan, a staged accident, tragic and plausible, that would silence Sarah Jennings. They didn't ask my permission. They informed me it was the only way to guarantee the security of the Pact. I was horrified. I couldn't allow an innocent person to be harmed, even to protect this extraordinary secret. I contacted Olin, desperate for guidance. His mental response was grave. "The unbalancing has reached a critical point, Governor. Your world's methods of control are brutal. If this accident occurs, it will create ripples that we cannot contain. Others will investigate. The truth, in its ugliest form, will eventually surface." He proposed a different approach, a risky one. "The human seeker has shown a remarkable dedication to truth. Perhaps the time for a partial unveiling has come. A controlled release of information, guided by you, the warden. It would be a gamble, but it might be the only way to avert a catastrophe orchestrated by fear." Olin's suggestion was radical. It went against 50 years of absolute secrecy. But the alternative, a journalist silenced, a truth buried under a lie, and the potential for wider, uncontrollable exposure, was even more terrifying. I made my decision. I contacted Sarah Jennings one last time, through an encrypted channel, offering her an exclusive off-the-record meeting at the location of her choosing. I told her I had the answers she was looking for, the real answers. She agreed, her suspicion palpable in her terse reply. We met in a desolate stretch of national forest, far from any prying eyes. The air was thick with anticipation and the weight of the impending revelation. I was about to break the Chimera Accord. I was about to gamble the future of humanity and an ancient alien race on the ability of one journalist to handle a truth beyond comprehension. The brink had been reached, and there was no turning back. The forest was silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the light breeze. I looked at Sarah Jennings, her sharp eyes fixed on mine, waiting. I knew I had to choose my words carefully. One wrong step, one unbelievable detail delivered poorly, and I would lose her trust, and with it, my last chance to control the narrative. "Sarah," I began, my voice low, "everything you suspect about Wyoming, it's real, But it's far more complex and far more important than a secret military project. I told her about the arrival in the 1970s, the damaged vessel, the race of scientists and cartographers who called themselves the Nomos. I spoke of the Chimera Accord, the exchange of technology for sanctuary, the quiet prosperity of Wyoming built on their silent partnership. I described the preserve, the breathtaking underground valley, and the ancient wisdom of the colonists. As I spoke, I watched Sarah's face. Disbelief warred with a dawning sense of understanding. She interrupted with sharp, pointed questions, forcing me to provide details, to offer explanations that, while extraordinary, held an internal consistency. I showed her carefully selected photographs of the preserve, images that couldn't be easily dismissed as hoaxes, but didn't reveal the full scale of the alien presence. I explained the role of the wardens, the need for secrecy, and the delicate balance that had been maintained for 50 years. I even told her about the radical faction and their dangerous plans to silence her. By the time I finished, the first light of dawn was beginning to filter through the trees. Sarah was silent, her notepad still in her lap, her gaze distant. I couldn't read her expression. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Aliens? Living in Wyoming?" "Yes," I said, "and they have been for 50 years. They are not a threat, Sarah. They are refugees, seeking to preserve their knowledge and their lineage. Their presence here has quietly benefited our state, and potentially could benefit all of humanity." I explained Olin's proposal, the idea of a controlled revelation. "We can't keep this secret forever. The cracks are too deep. But we can choose how the world learns the truth. We can present it responsibly, focusing on the potential for understanding and cooperation rather than fear and panic." I offered her the exclusive story, the chance to be the journalist who broke the biggest story in human history, but with a condition. We would work together. We would release the information carefully, strategically, with the goal of education and understanding. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed. "Why me, Governor? Why trust me with something like this?" "Because," I said, meeting her gaze, "you sought the truth even when powerful forces tried to stop you. You have proven your dedication. Now, I need you to help me guide the world to it." The decision hung in the air between us, a choice that would determine not only Sarah's future, but the future of a secret that had shaped our world for half a century. Sarah Jennings, after hours of intense questioning and reviewing the evidence I provided, agreed. She understood the gravity of the situation and the potential for widespread panic if the revelation wasn't handled carefully. We spent the next few weeks working in secret, crafting a series of articles and preparing a comprehensive data dump that would be released strategically. The liaison and a select group of trusted individuals within the Warden Coast were brought into the loop, their expertise crucial in navigating the technological and informational challenges ahead. The first article, published simultaneously across multiple reputable news outlets, focused on the statistical anomalies of Wyoming's economy and scientific advancements, posing the question of a hidden catalyst. It generated widespread curiosity and debate, just as we had hoped. Subsequent articles slowly unveiled more pieces of the puzzle, hinting at a classified technological breakthrough with unusual origins. Finally, Sarah published her magnum opus, The Story of the Chimera Accord, accompanied by carefully vetted photographs and excerpts from the Roswell Memorandum, declassified through a discreet channel I had access to. The world reacted with a mixture of disbelief, fascination, and, yes, some fear. But because the information was presented responsibly, backed by credible evidence, and framed within a narrative of peaceful contact and mutual benefit, the widespread panic we had feared never materialized. There were, of course, those who cried hoax, conspiracy, and even invasion.
but the sheer volume of corroborating evidence, combined with Sarah's impeccable reputation, began to sway public opinion. Governments around the world were forced to acknowledge the story, launching their own investigations and demanding answers. Olin and the colonists, after much deliberation, decided to make a limited, controlled appearance. A holographic projection of Olin addressed the world, his calm, resonant voice speaking of their history, their intentions, and their hope for a shared future. It was a moment of profound historical significance, the day humanity officially learned that it was not alone. The world did not end. There was no mass hysteria. Instead, there was a sense of cautious optimism, a dawning realization of the vast possibilities that lay ahead. The technologies shared through the Accord began to be implemented on a global scale, offering solutions to some of humanity's most pressing challenges. My role as governor shifted dramatically. Wyoming, once an unassuming state, became the epicenter of first contact, a hub for interspecies communication and collaboration. Sarah Jennings became a global icon, her career reaching heights she could never have imagined. The radical faction of wardens, exposed by our carefully managed release of information, were quietly investigated and neutralized, their fear-based agenda replaced by a cautious hope for the future. Looking out at the horizon, at a world now aware of its place in a much larger universe, I felt a sense of weary satisfaction. The secret was revealed, not in chaos and fear, but in a way that offered a glimmer of a brighter tomorrow. The Chimera Accord, once a fragile pact built on secrecy, now had the potential to become a foundation for a new era of understanding, cooperation, and shared destiny. The night had been long, filled with shadows and difficult choices, but the dawn had finally arrived, bringing with it the promise of a future we could only begin to imagine.